Recording in progress.
Yay.
Welcome. We were just chatting before, but I'll just pretend we weren't. Hello, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
That's all right. So today, because I've just been through one of your courses, the manifestation one. What was that one called again?
So it's a bit of a long name, but it's Trauma-Informed Manifestation Coaching Certification, or you can cut it short to TIMC. Normally people do that.
That's why I can remember it. I remember almost everything that's in it. I just couldn't remember what it was called.
Yeah.
And so for people that have seen either like me talk to them or me talk to other people, I've never been against spirituality, but I always like to know what I'm talking about. So I then haven't spent a lot of time talking about anything that's spiritual because generally like I wasn't sure what to say, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But after doing this particular course, like there's a framework that you give where basically like I found that like, just to give sort of like, I guess my experience with it, I was like watching a lot of the stuff that you were doing and like, you know, like showing like there's the Kajabi thing that you've put out online courses and did like, you know, what 7 figures by May and all these really cool things. And you're like, how do you do that? You're like, email, you know, Facebook ads, something like that. And other people go, well, I did emails, I did Facebook ads, doesn't work. And so sometimes like when you get that doesn't work energy from somebody, sometimes like you can argue back and be like, yes, it does. And then the energy between the people are kind of like, well, all right, well, you can't see it my way. Oh, well, you can't see it my way. All right, well, let's go, you know, separate ways. But your approach is very like different, open, still structured, and you don't try to control what people think, but instead it's like you create like a container where they can be basically more so like safe to experience things in whatever way they want and then get results and basically really do. Because
it really is. It's teaching people to trust themselves, trust their intuition, and it's so cliche and it's overused, but to believe in themselves. But that's more so like when they have intuitive hits, when they feel funky about something and shift it, and then they get a desire that they want for their business or their life, their intuition, their higher self or the universe, whatever, God, whatever you want to call it, will throw you ideas, but then sometimes our human self just doesn't want to get on board, or we just don't listen to it. Like there's so many factors. So it's just about recognizing when something drops in for us in our own special way. Because my thing is there's no rules in business. People can say that there's rules, but people just blow up and do it in their own particular way and it works for them. So helping people to their own that where they like freaking love what they're doing, the way that they're doing it in their own way.
Well, let's say that with rules in business could be like, you know, here's the exact steps or something, here's rules, follow them sort of thing. And because there's like, I guess, multiple pathways, it's like what we're saying is that there's no one set of rules that's going to be right for everybody. Yeah. And so it would be like you do it all offline or you do it all online or you do it all through, you know, Instagram. No, you do it all through Facebook. No, you do it all through the newspaper. Or it's like, no, you do it all through online courses. No, you do it all through emails. But like, and when it comes to people that aren't really taking much action, it's like rules seem to be like, well, here's a framework, follow them. But then like only something like a very small percentage of people seem to, when just given an exact set of rules, get there. But then they swear by it because they go like, it just works so easily. But then we're looking at like anyone else who sort of isn't there or isn't getting there, other things are coming up. And so there's pretty much like 4 approaches I've seen to teaching people or business coaching people. And yours is the 4th one that I'll talk about.
Yes, I have my own category.
Yes. And you're almost the only one in it that I've seen. But the first one is like what I'd call like, you know, the PT or the general sergeant that sort of like yells at them. It's like that insults them, basically makes them feel bad about the gap. It's like, you're down here, you should be here. And then, you know, insulting them, pathetic, drop and give me 20 push-ups. You're not doing enough work. Do more work, damn it. And that does work for some people, but there's so many people, especially when it comes to like, say, if they're going to be a therapist, like say if they're a PT, it's kind of like they're used to that, or if they're in the army, they're used to that. But in the therapy world, bringing this sort of like this coaching, yell at you until you,
we're like empathetic, sensitive, like little souls just trying to help people.
Yeah. And so it just doesn't even fit with that industry. And so the second one I've seen is basically like prestige. which is like, look at my shiny watch and Ferrari. And so I've seen a lot of people, again, like in sales and in real estate and like lots of places, they'll use, and I've seen particular people that would put into this category, everything's prestige, as in like, look at me, look at how successful I am. Like, I have this many followers, I have this much money, I have this much success. And so aren't you inspired to follow me? And what seems to happen with that one is that they get followed and they successfully sell to all these people down here, but the gap never gets closed because it's all about like the gap. It's the fame that makes them their prestige. So they're literally having to be better than the people that they're serving. And if that gap gets closed, well, then they don't exist anymore as prestige. Not to say that like we shouldn't shower and kind of look after our appearance and looks and everything, but to say that that's going to close the gap, it just seems to not work. Another one that I found myself falling into a lot previously was the done for you approach for free. As in like, well, if you're having that much trouble, what I'll do then is I'll just come and do it for you. And then they go, thanks for the 20 hours that you just donated to me, but I've changed my mind on what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And so it's like that they weren't as committed as what the coach was. So the coach shouldn't be giving like, oh, here's like all of my life that, you know, like between birth and death, I've got, you know, my life is made up of the moments and time that I get to live. And here's some for you, which means it's not for me anymore. So here's some of me. Here's some of my life. And they're like,
and you know what, that can, and I touched on this in the course, that can come from a proving energy. Like, we want to prove to people that it works. We want to prove to people that we're intelligent. You know what I mean? And so we are trying to get some kind of payoff out of it. For us to say, see. But then, again, like with the fourth one, mine, it's like, your ways might not be right for them or work for them at all anyway.
Yeah. Something really interesting about your approach is just how relaxed it is and how relaxed you are, that you're not projecting or forceful, like, you know, like, take my thing, take my model, believe it, agree with me. Like, you're not ever doing that. And it's kind of like, you know, it's not even the goal. It's like, I wasn't even checking to see if you agree with me. It's just, I exist. I don't know. And then anytime something goes wrong, you're like, oh, maybe that was right. Maybe I was supposed to go left and center right.
Comments under the lesson. So when you jump into one of our courses, you can ask questions under each lesson and I get back to you. And some people are like, this didn't work for me. I'm like, all right, well, maybe it wasn't meant to be, or try it this way. Like, I don't know. We're so complex beings that unless I'm working with them one-on-one and I know them deeply, and they know themselves, then not everything's going to work for everyone. Like, it's really not. And the whole thing with the course is, this is what you're working with. You're not just working with the 3D reality that you can see. You're working with an ancient body that has a nervous system that's millions of years old, that reacts like an animal. You're working with other people in this matrix kind of thing and this orchestra of the universe. You're working with thought, which is a fourth dimension. You're working, you know, on other dimensions that you can't even see. And so everything accumulates, like there's a momentum, and there's also just so many levels that we're working on. So when we make a goal from our ego, like for our business, to say, I want this much, but your body is like, I've worked that much in the past, or I've never made that much, and I'm just going to shut down. And then we're like, oh, I'm just sabotaging. And we go to a coach to help us with sabotaging. And it's like, your body is literally trying to help you, like, not have another breakdown or burn out.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why it's trauma informed. Like, you've got to take all the aspects into account when it comes to, you know, what you're trying to manifest, what you're trying to achieve in a certain kind of area of your life. We try and give that like framework, so then you have more levels of thought going on than just anything that you can just see. Like, there's more going on in the background.
Yeah. I love like how Abraham Hicks says that, like, if it exists, it's old news. So it's almost like, pay no attention to what is. Like, your money, health, and relationships right now, that's yesterday already. Like, what we're looking for is the vibration that you're coming in, like, right this moment, because it's a chance to reset. And when it's like,
linked to that is, like, when you try to cognitively say, grow your business and your income, you're only going to have the thoughts that you've always had. You're not going to have like the level of thought and consciousness that you have now. That's why you keep creating the same results, or less sometimes. Take a step back. And so that's why you've got to like leave that and go, yeah, you need to have like a higher level, like a new level of thought coming in, which is your intuition, for you to have the new ideas to create the new reality. Because otherwise that's why people just get stuck in their habits and their patterns, and they're not like going further. So for me, I was like, yeah, we hit our income, but like we're not making enough profit. And like every month I could see in my Xero, I don't know if you guys use Xero or like the accounting software, I'm like, the money is going up, but the fucking expenses are going up with it too. So I'm manifesting what I want, but for some reason, like I'm manifesting more expenses. I don't know how I'm doing it. Like I'm looking at all the freaking numbers, like, and then I'm like, wait a second, what if I just put the instructions out to the universe that I want it to be like this? So this is expenses, this is profit. And literally last month it looked like that, and I was like, fuck. How did that happen? My partner's like, how the hell did that happen? We made like 50K profit or whatever. And I'm like, I don't know, I just imagined it every day and then it happened. And you can't explain that shit. And someone scientific, they're like, or like really left brain, they're like, give me like the steps of that. And I'm like, I don't know, like I gave instructions to my subconscious and my unconscious mind, probably, and I took steps that were aligned with that new vision. Pretty simple.
I love how with the old thing of like, the profit goes, the sales go up, but the expenses go up. Like T. Harv Eker would call that broke at a higher level. And then like what you found, like how there's the sanity and the vanity. And so like the sales might be the vanity, like you would say, look at this, but then the profit you keep can be the sanity. Be like, well, at least, like I've got a place, I've got a family, I've got the things that actually are meaningful, not just the things that I can, put it up on the gram and show people how great I look. But this terminology, like I find that because throughout the course, you set up the terminology, then throughout the course that the terminology keeps coming back up again, which is done really well. So like when you say things like in like three-dimensional, it's like you're talking about like, versus things that basically can't be seen. So in a way, like we're talking about blind spots. And so like if someone keeps getting the same results, and no matter how hard they work, they keep they keep running into basically like a blind spot, which means they don't know what's doing it. Or when you say trauma informs, like I think I'd heard you before say those words so many times, not quite understanding at that time what you were talking about, but then after going through your course, going like, oh, okay, so if you yell at a person to get better, they won't. Trauma informed is more like it's like we've got like it's like how there's thoughts, feelings, and then the body. And so if someone's leg is broken, you can't yell at that leg to get better. The same as you can't yell at emotions to get better.
Yeah.
Maybe
and another way, so I cut you off, but like another way to think about trauma informed, like in a statement, like in a sentence, is like why are you doing that? Rather than saying why are you doing that or why aren't you doing that, especially if we're trying to coach someone or whatever, it's like what happened to you? Like why are you, like what happened to you? So when you shift that, you're going from like just seeing and in NLP, it's like the person is not the behavior. Like something's happened for them not to want to take action or do something. There's something that's holding them back, and all of a sudden you're at a deeper level with them as a coach. As soon as you shift that question.
Because I think what people do a lot of the time, like with coaches, that they create pain. Like they'll literally say things like, until the pain of changing is greater than the pain of not changing, that you'll never change. And you're like, okay, it's true. Because like, if you're kind of like, if someone drops you into a pot of boiling water, it sucks. So you are very motivated to get out. But then like with that frog analogy, that if you boil it slowly enough, they don't even recognize necessarily what's happening because the change is basically just blended into their environment. They just think that's life.
And so also it might feel comfortable to them because they've grown up in a home where they're used to narcissism and being in a narcissistic relationship or in relationships, and then relational trauma plays out between the practitioner or coach and a client. And so as you yourself knowing, am I playing out my trauma as well on my clients, like because you have a certain level of power over them.
Yeah.
We have to start questioning, like, how am I running this from a place of trauma, or am I like being really present with this person, and kind of wanting the best. So I remember when I started struggling after like 3 or 4 months, because I quit my job and just decided I'd be a coach now. Um,
Yeah.
and I remember this guy, and he wanted to business coach me, and I was in tears because he was like doing a follow-up call, and I was just in tears, like, he's like, you just got to do it. You just got to show up. You have to. I'm like, I feel like throwing up. He's like, go throw up and then pick up the phone. And I'm like, I'm just in tears. Like, he had no, like, there was nothing around like my trauma or why I couldn't pick up the phone, or why,
Yeah.
I wasn't making the money. Like, there was no like empathy there. Do you know what I mean? And that's what drove me from just doing NLP to like
Yeah.
naturally going through this spiritual and trauma stuff, because I'm like, that's not right.
And that's what I call that type 1 coach of the PT coach or the army
Yeah,
coach. And so it's
yeah,
like almost if you were to see a doctor and said, like, I broke my leg while I was running, and then they just start telling you how to run better. And you're like, well, can you look at the leg, please?
yeah,
It feels like no one's looking at the broken leg. And so
yeah,
like you're coming in and sort of noticing, like, okay, there's control dramas, like just like in that book Celestine Prophecy,
yeah.
like where they sort of talk about you can be like aloof, or you can be an interrogator, or you can be like a bully or a victim, like the poor me. And so it's kind of like as they play out, they're controlling for energy. And so it's like, well, I don't want to just control my energy, which feels great to control, but I enjoy your energy as a source because I haven't found it anywhere else. And so now
Mm,
if I want to control all of the energy that I enjoy, that means controlling you. And you're like, well,
mm,
that doesn't feel good for the other person. And then that can play out kind of not so great. And then
yeah,
going, well, if that's the dynamic, how is that going to work? Moving that
yeah.
into business, like when people's traumas come up into to literally just into their business, how are they possibly going to scale that?
Oh my gosh, being in business is the biggest freaking trigger and healing journey, personal development journey that you can go on. All of your insecurities come up. If someone asks for a refund, someone says no to a sale, like, we get more and more resilient, but so many people drop out just because it's triggered something really deep and really hard, and there's no one there to hold space for them, or there's no awareness that something's being triggered. They're like, well, this is just not for me, and they give up, which
Yeah.
is really sad. But one of the best things I heard a coach say ever, that really like helped me with my journey and to give myself the control back and stop trying to play it out on others, was, it's always you versus you.
Yeah.
It's always you versus you. So whenever I want to, even in my relationship, I want to change Ryan, I'm like, where can I find that in me and shift it in me? If people are always all of a sudden asking for refunds, or I'm getting a little bit attacked or something, I'll go, okay, where inside me, or where do I need to take ownership and massive responsibility? I need to change something in the course. I need to change how I'm speaking to them. Like, I bring it back to me. And then there's no more like wars with others, because really they're just a mirror reflecting back to you.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
So it's like that you don't project onto others to the point like where you have any need at all to change the other person's opinion.
Mm,
And so things come to you, and the same as like with your clients, like things come to them. Like, or even like there's too many examples in this last week, but just we were talking just before about like how whenever I felt like something wasn't moving forward, or I was in my office like waiting for something, waiting for a call, someone was late, whatever it was, it's like I go for the walk, and then as soon as I go for the walk,
yeah.
the Amazon package turns up, the delivery person
Yeah.
turns up, or the person calls me back, or the one that I've been waiting on, like, is expecting them to call me for 3 days.
It's
It's like,
funny
but
how
I
you
can't.
say like when things weren't moving forward and then you just started moving and then they moved forward.
Yeah. And as you were saying before, it's also a surrender of some kind of
Yeah.
going, well, if I can't control this right now, what if I just like let it happen? It's like that I have access to summer and I have access to winter, but I don't really seem to have any say on when.
Yeah. And
um,
another good analogy is, like when you're early, like when you're young and like someone really likes you and they're just real clingy and they're scared to lose you, and you're like repulsed by it. You're like, ew, dude, like,
yeah.
I don't know if you would say dude, like ew chick or whatever, but um it's kind of like that literally with everything. If you're trying to like grasp onto it, fear of not having it, you are repulsing it because you're really saying, I don't have this thing.
Yeah.
So obviously
People
I
like
agree
being
definitely with
desired
going
and
to the
appreciated,
course. Yeah.
but they don't want to go so far as to like, they don't want to be cornered by a creep.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like there's a difference.
Yeah.
So to, I wouldn't necessarily like give credit to like with what I could necessarily just say about like the course, but it's there's three things that I translated out of this as to like what I made of it, and this is not necessarily going to be like what everybody else makes of it, but three rules that I came up with based on your thing.
I'm so glad
And
that you did it because you're so good at this. So I might pinch it.
the first one was like to hold the vision. So it's that you can either fantasize about a positive or fantasize about a negative. Most people aren't when they're busy, when they're in a habit, most people aren't aware of which one they're doing. And so it could be us included if we weren't aware to go, hang on, did you picture the customer being happy? Did you picture them, basically not, asking for a refund? Did you picture them? So whatever the picture is, often does tend to be like what happens on the other side. Like I was just talking to someone on the phone earlier today, doing a sales job, and he's like, hitting and calling 100 numbers. And he's gone like, on those days where I want them to not answer, they don't. So physically, he has a telephone. How could he possibly, like, by dialing the numbers, make the other person not answer? But he's gone, but you know what? There's a correlation there, even if I don't understand the causation. Am I psychic or did I put it out there? I don't know. But he does know that on those days that he doesn't want people to answer, no one answers.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
I've
kind
had
of
that
like
where I'm like, I really don't feel like a client today, and all of a sudden they'll message me canceling, or we've messaged each other at exactly the same time saying, "Can we reschedule?" I'm like, whoa, our souls are talking to each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And so with, like various things that I do as well, with the government funded clients and with like just others that come and then people buying. So it's like that I had like just a day just recently where I thought like, well, what would happen if I got basically money through FBOS, cash, and checks on the same day? I've never actually seen that happen before. And so then I got 3 checks. And so it just with this wasn't including any PayPal stuff, but this was just through the FBOS, through the cash, then through the checks. It was basically 2,900 that turned up. But in advance, like I was talking to my brother about, it's like, oh, imagine if like all 3 happened on the same day, which never has happened, and then it happened that day.
Did it?
And so like,
Oh, that's so
yeah, like
cool.
I put a picture on Facebook and just sort of,
It's so
because it's
powerful to say, what would it feel like, or what would it be like? It's so it creates like a black hole in the universe of possibility. It's just like, all right, because you never. That's what I said. You can't create with the same level of thinking. You've got to
yeah.
have different, yeah.
And so using the same technique for negative, like perhaps unconsciously, it would be like when people are doing the opposite. So it's like they're visualizing something that's the worst case scenario because they're worried about it. And then more of that seems to be like what they get. And so it's really important to until it becomes a habit, to be conscious of like what's the actual image. The second rule was what I was calling like the open heart. So people spend too much time trying to protect their heart or protect their feelings from hurt rather than opening them up to the unknown of the world. And so when you step into the unknown, kind of like a child does, or like, you do as a teenager in your 20s, you're like, I'm going to get out there, I'm going to be the best, I'm going to take risks, I'm going to do things that no one else has done. But then often like when people get to their late 20s, 30s or onwards, they look back and they're kind of like remembering those good times of when they used to take risks, but they haven't done it for a very long time. And so like they might be like holding the vision, but if they haven't amplified it by the open heart, there's no movement to it. So they haven't sort of like basically said, I'm open to whatever happens, plus specifically this vision.
Yeah.
And the third was like structures that can sort of support you on those days when you're not consciously particularly doing anything. So whether it might be like, it could be like physically, like the 3 dimensions, the online course that you sell or something else, or like a multiple income streams, but more so like the structures that you produce of like these daily habits that gets your mind, whether it's a good day or a bad day, to do these exercises. It's like that what's the structure that, whether you've got high or low energy, is still going to give you that positive vision? Like, what's the short sentences that you can say that just work, as long as you just breathe through it and hold the vision and open the heart?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so by having a body of structures, it becomes easy to then do the other two.
Yeah.
And so when people don't have it, it's like that they might succeed for a while with the open heart and the vision, but then they'll go like, oh, yeah, that worked a few years ago.
That's what happens when people start businesses. They usually have this beginner's luck, they call it, because there's the initial excitement. When you pull in a vision, you become that person to create that vision, you be that person. But what happens is then all of a sudden you don't get results, and then people like kind of give up. But at the start, you're in love with your business, you're passionate, you're excited, you had visions in your head. And so it is all about just re-tapping into that pretty much daily. So you freaking love what you do, you love your business, or you love whatever you want to call in, you loving yourself and allowing yourself to have desires and being able to keep up that energy every day. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's why I love, like with your course, if we can use this as a pivot to sell it. And I reckon you guys should get it, because I reckon, like, mainly because it comes up naturally in conversation anyway. So I've just been telling people, like, you got to try this, you got to try this. And they're like, what is it? Can you send us a link? I thought, okay, this is really just that conversation with you guys, just like, oh, you got to try this thing, but just now through a video thing.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. And yeah, any questions, they can like just find us and message us, thecenterforhealing.com. And yeah, it's all accredited and stuff like that through IICT. And you get lifetime access. So it's not like you get the course and you have to do it within a certain amount of time. It's pre-recorded, so you take as long as you need, and then you've got it for life to come back on later, which often people do, because you will grow, your conscious level will change, and then you will see it differently, like when you read a book a few years later. So we like to allow for that.
Just recently, I've reread 3 books that I read like something like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I swear that they ended differently.
Yeah, it's like you read a whole different book almost. You're like, what? Your filters are so different.
It's like I've been telling people for ages that it went this way, but it went the exact opposite. I'm like, oh, okay, I was only like, 20 when I read it. I know I was on a bus that was doing this every 2 seconds. So I'm like, oh, I've read that page. But this time I sat down and I read it like as a 40-year-old, and I'm like, that thing that I thought happened didn't happen at all. But so good. And so like kind of like doing this thing I was talking about, hold the vision, open the heart, and then the structures to sustain it. While I'm thinking about and visualizing, the right person who sees this, who needs to do the course, will buy it. I'm also visualizing that you're doing, or that whoever this is that I'm talking to is going to do it, if that's right for you. Because it's those practices that I think that you want to sort of get comfy, I guess, trying things, even if like you're someone like me who kind of goes like, well, not anti woo-woo stuff as we call it, but kind of if you're someone who just like needs to know, it's like, how's that work? How's that? Like a little child going, why, or how? It's like, but there is sometimes that more relaxed approach, which you don't need to see everything in order to get started. You can actually basically, it can be about healing. Is like the latest technology these days doesn't seem to be necessarily about like, here's the script, here's the line, say this and somebody will buy, which used to be a thing until it's like, oh, but now everyone's heard the trick. And so these days, the real latest technology is about like, it's knowing yourself and healing and letting go, so that you're already enough to then move forward and to figure out the steps. And there's steps, but it's like, it's open that a person can trust themselves to come up with their own steps too.
Yeah,
so
100%.
100%. I was just, how like what on Netflix, like you just binge it and you just like sort of like go just next. And so it's not necessarily like, how you'd encourage someone to study it. It's like, stop and do all the exercises. I'm like, but first I just want to get through all the videos fast, and then Mark will go through it slowly.
But you know what? That's what we love doing pre-recorded, because people study in different ways and we want to allow for that. So I love that you've honored the way that you study. Like, that's perfect.
Yeah. I mean, like, not everybody listens to meditations at double speed.
You're like, oh yes, I get the gist of that. Yes. This
Yeah,
means
it's like you can listen to it at normal speed, but I want to relax faster.
That's funny.
So to get the course, hit the button. How much is it? And is
So
there anything people need to know?
it's 2222, but if you use Scott's special code, you'll get 10% off.
Oh, wow.
So they'll
Perfect.
get that discount, and there's payment plan as well, 12-month payment plan, if that feels more safe for you and your nervous system
Yeah.
to pay over time.
And I would love to hear what you guys think of the course when you do it, because I'm really genuinely curious. And then I want to hear if you just start telling everyone else about it, going like, you've got to check out this thing, because there's concepts in it that obviously aren't going to be all brand new, but they're presented in a way where you go like, now I get it. Like, it's kind of like, thank you for putting all of that into place, where it's so like these two approaches, I suppose. Like one is like manifestation, get all the things. And the other one is like, well, hang on, like be kind to the person who's getting there. And like you put those two together. So like the trauma informed manifestation. And it's like, oh, okay. So if somebody could just like help me up, it's like if you slip off a rock and someone puts their hand out, you don't have to like yell at them like, stop slipping off rocks while helping them up. Which sounds ridiculous put that way, but it's such a common approach of like create pain until the person basically just like caves in and sort of like obeys you.
Yeah.
And these days, like nobody puts up with that. That's
Yeah.
why like people they try things and they don't follow through, because you're like, well,
Yeah.
okay, well, if I want something that's going to work in my particular way without someone necessarily yelling.
And it's definitely something that you can do like as a self-healing journey, or if you are helping people, particularly because of the other therapies that we've got, there's a lot of past healing, you know, even with hypnotherapy, there's like regression and blah, blah, blah. You're working with the things of the past. If you find that you have clients that like want to work towards goals and you want to have like a more positive spin kind of on your sessions, then this is like getting out of the healing loop and going into like the manifestation realm. And some people kind of combine them. But this makes it freaking exciting. This makes life like amazing. Not just like, oh, I've got another trauma to heal, limiting belief, habit to break. It brings a whole new spin to your practice as well.
I just think it's something that everybody should go through. So like when you've studied other things.
I'm just gonna cut that out and make it like this.
That's the trailer. That's the thumbnail.
Like in a nutshell.
Yeah. You're like, oh, is it only if you're in business? Like, well, not necessarily. Like, well, what if you are in business? Well, then it's also for you. It's like that. It's something that everyone should go through, whether you're in business or not, whether you just want to help out your friends or whether you actually want to see, you know, a zillion clients or whatever. It's a framework. It's like, you know, like in chess, like where you're not going to say like, here's move one, then here's move two. Like they're the strategies. It's more kind of like the rules, as in like, well, this is the realms that we exist in, and here's some realms maybe that you didn't know about that are having an influence on you. It's probably good to know about.
Mm-hmm. And then experimenting and seeing like the excitement, like you, if things just show up, like you're just manifesting things that you're like, oh, that was easy. Like, what's next?
Yeah, absolutely. Because like as you think things, it happens. Like there's probably, you know, you guys can come up with your own examples of like, you know, oh, as a kid, I had that argument with my sister. It's like, how did it play out? Exactly as I expected. And it's like that. Even like, you know, the different scenes in the background all had to be in place. Like the car went past at the right time as the dog barked and the ball, you know, all these things that had to happen because in their imagination it happens. And you're like, well, that argument really went exactly as I kept rehearsing it, because that's what I put out there.
Yeah. I think a really good statement, and I am going to add lessons to the course every year or so because I'm always like building on new things and I'm always an experiment with myself, what in the realm of what's possible. But one thing is, instead of saying, how can it get any worse, like when things are going shit, ask the question, how can it get any better? And every day that I've been asking that, I feel like I'm taking ecstasy pills, to be honest. Because I'm like, how can it get any better? And I feel like a little kid and I'm like, how can it get any better? I'm just looking for how it can get better, or asking like, show me, how can it get better? So those
Yeah,
kind of things are really fun.
100%. And it's interesting then, like how like almost unconscious it becomes, like driving,
Yeah.
where you know about it, you're conscious of it, but you don't have to constantly sort of like mention like, oh wait, that was a manifestation. You just sort of like are doing it.
Yeah.
It's like if you've had a shower and you smell better, you don't sort of walk around going like, I'm walking outside of my house now having had a shower. Like you don't have to say it. It just is.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I
Definitely.
better go. Like we just got the time constraints and stuff in this
Yeah,
three-dimensional world that
sorry
we've got.
about that because I came really late. I was living my best life and I forgot about our meeting time.
Well, that's the the joke that I'd made before. Like, is Mel trying to teach me something about patience? Like, like as soon as I went like, all right, I'm going to leave, I'm going to walk across the road. Then you messaged me back, and like at the same spot, like when the Amazon thing turned up, when a friend calls me, it's like I could like draw a chalk mark on the ground. Like, if you want like your life to move forward, go outside of your office and walk there. But it's not about the spot. It's more kind of like the whole. I can't leave my office because if I leave, it's like the Amazon person will
We're going to call it your surrender spot. That's what we're going to call it.
surrender spot.
We'll put a little sign like Pooh Bear has these little signs, in the 100-acre wood, and we'll put the little sign, surrender, Scott's surrender spot. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. But thank you so much for letting me ask you these questions. And
No,
guys,
thank you.
the call to action: hit the button, buy the course, do all the. I think that you'd love it. Like it's actually quite good, and that's why I really wanted to because I reached out to you about this one.
Scott, this is when you messaged me and said I did the course and I loved it. I was like really taken aback because I know you're very switched on, you're very smart. And for me, I'm like, that's quite a woo-woo course. So that actually means a lot coming from you to say that it's good. Like, I'm actually blown away and I'm like very, very grateful.
Well, it's like what you've done is, I guess the periodic table was like very unscientific until it was mapped out.
Mm.
But they had to start somewhere. They had to start mapping out what it was, and that's what I feel that you've done is that you've given like the nominalizations, or you've given like the here's the glossary, here's the elements that you should be aware of, here's the worlds that you exist in. Now that you know about them, now you can play.
Mm.
So that's what really made me like it, because I've kind of noticed that there are other courses on spirituality that like just it just felt like a cop out. Like I don't know how anything works, haha, but it's all great. And I mean that's fine. But what about those people left behind? Not to say the ones that already relate to that, but just what about the ones left behind who go like, hang on, I just need to ask some questions. And you're like,
Yeah, like
no,
you've got an analytical mind. You like to know the how and the why
yeah,
for you to feel like confident with it. Yeah.
you explained it. So that when people say things like, well, if you're asking, maybe it's not for you. Like maybe you just sort of can't figure these things out. I'm
Yeah,
like,
that's
well, I
like
think
you said, that's a cop out. Yeah.
yeah, it's a cop out. I feel it's a cop out. So it's like where I talk about like a tough, clear, kind thing, which is kind of like those three coach styles. Like tough is the up there,
Mm.
yelling at. Then there's the kinds, which is like, oh, let me do it all, or like sort of like the kinds like almost prestige or something, or the clear is like it could be let me do it for you. But it's like that this approach of kind of like, well, very relaxed. Here it is. I saw like, just one, I guess, tiny little thing I saw recently before I go. But I saw this guy that he's teaching pickup art stuff. And so people might hear that and be like, pickup stuff. But he's basically gone like, look, there's men out there that are looking for love. And, again, like back in the 80s, 90s, well, more kind of like early 2000s, there was a whole bunch of like playbooks, like, say these things to women and they'll love you. And it seemed to get results, and then it seemed to stop get results. Then they would get the Me Too movement. Then the whole pickup artist industry was like they were looked at even worse than before. And so he basically said that like, I just want to tell you where we're at in history, which is that we're in a state in history where when I tell you that if you want to find love, so as a man, if you want to go out and find love, it's not about pickup lines anymore, even if they work. And that's the thing, even if they can still work, but that's not what will do it for you. What will do it for you is actually letting go and trusting that you're already enough. And then something will happen and you will be your best self and you will find someone.
Oh,
And then
I love that.
he draws this circle and goes like, there's you, there's the entire you. If we can just say that that's what it is. and then is gone. So as a kid, you went out and expressed yourself in every possible way, then smack. What? Don't do that. Like, oh, you're too noisy in a shopping center. Smack, don't do that. And you're like, well, it's not safe to be noisy then, I suppose. So then you grow up and you're like, well, there's the woman that I like to say hello to, but it's not safe to be noisy. So I'm
And
not
that
going to
comes back to being trauma informed. The nervous system doesn't feel safe to take action on our desires. 100%.
Yeah. So it doesn't need to be pickup lines. It was very much about like, well, if you're healed, wouldn't business and love and health and all these things, like a lot of those blockages would just melt away, and you could trust yourself, and that the trauma informed to say that, like, not everybody is at that completely cleared out stage. And
I mean, you never are, to be honest. It's a lifetime journey, but some people are just further along in the journey.
Yes. And then there's people with prestige that like, oh, look how easy it is, to the point of like unrelatability. It's like, look, I made 200 billion. It's like, dude, that means nothing to me. I mean, like, good for you, but it means nothing to me because I don't think that's going to help me pay my bills.
Yeah, but I met a guy at a cafe the other day and he's like, oh, I'll have so many clients for you. I've got so many super rich friends and they're all on antidepressants, on this and that. And I'm just like, yeah, because they're just trying to fill a hole that's not, you can never fill. But you can be rich and be fulfilled. And that's what the manifesting course is about, to call in visions that are from your soul level, not from your ego.
Yeah.
Then it is different, than it is fulfilling. So that's a massive part of it.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. One more thing.
It's like a trauma response. Like, yeah, you got to go. Yeah. Sorry, we can talk
sorry, I do. But yes, one more thing I wanted to.
Yeah.
Because based on that, I was talking to someone recently about like, how to win, and like say there's a village that's like under attack, and it's horrible because under attack's not nice. Like it's one of the worst possible things ever. And so then like one person has to be so strong that they learn fighting skills and martial arts and weapons, and they build an army, and they're so strong that they can basically fight off the army and they win. And you're like, okay, well that's a success of some kind. And then they go home and it sucks. So they didn't lose the war, like they won, but then every year like their village is under attack and under attack and under attack. And so then like the next success they have is they go, maybe I don't need to be in this village. And so their biggest win ever is that they actually go, what about this village over here? Like this one's never getting attacked. Well, you could have done that from the start. And so that win that a lot of people look at is like, how do I conquer? How do I find love? How do I lose 15 kilos? How do I get another million or my first million in the account?
How do I prove that I'm enough to my parents?
Yeah. How do I be loved? How do I be enough through someone else's eyes so they can give me the approval? And so then the bigger win is like, what if none of that existed? Like none of it. And you got to start like just fresh as, well, you're enough.
Yeah.
Like,
and what would you do if you're enough? What would you do? Yeah.
What would you do with it? What would you, let's say like, that you went to a job that you loved and you went to a home that you loved and you just love it all. So you're not having to, become some big hero to fight the demons off. There's just no demons.
Yeah.
Like, isn't that better? Like I would, anybody would probably say, well, that's way.
And we're not saying like you should just like settle for like boring. Like you can have massive desires and goals and still feel like that. The whole goal is to feel peaceful, even when we're trying to make billions. So why not just feel peaceful now?
Yes. So it's not about
having access to that as well.
Yeah. So like, because all of these distinctions and what you get in the course, like it's not about like having a better life is not about hide in a hole so that nothing bad gets you. It's completely not about that at all. Even though it can be like an old translation someone has, it's like, oh, the only way to not have all the demons in your life is to do nothing. Well, you can actually trust yourself. The whole thing about the open hearts, like you can actually have all these relationships with friends and family and stuff and like, relate and have love without the demons, but still with the adventure, still with the excitement and all of that. The part of like, but the trauma informed is like the person saying, but they're not trying to be difficult. They would rather you just sort of, as you would say, be trauma informed about where they're coming from rather than branding yourself as magnificent. It's like, well, that's great. But it's like, but look at what I'm going through with the maybe less knowledge than you, or like through, less money than you, or like less love than you. It's like, oh, okay. Because when they're branding themselves, but I've already conquered all these problems. Well, good for you then. But it's like, but what about me? And so the trauma informed of like that, okay, well, help them to sort of like get awareness of that. And then they can move to like where they're enough and they can relax and they can do life.
Yeah, it does make life easier, more fun, definitely.
100%. Just live it. Well, my lights just turned off, ran out of battery. And
Is
I do
that a
need to go.
sign from the
Thank you so
universe?
much. Yeah,
Thank
the
you
button's there. You
for
guys know what to do. Thank you.
yeah.
I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.